The question we have to ask is the current system and the architecture of the current system serving the most people possible in the most effective way? And the answer is simple, it isn't. Now, if you ask anybody under 30 who lived through the great financial crisis and watched all of these crooks get away with massive crimes against millions of people and not a single one of them went to jail, or they look around them and they see lack of jobs, lack of economic inclusion, or you go and talk to people in any country where the access to financial services and banking is extremely limited, that system isn't working. So arguably, you would assume that if something is competing with your industry by providing a better service, the way you respond to that is by providing a better service yourself. And that's not what the banking system does. It prevents competition by putting up barriers to competitors rather than trying to improve its own product. And the problem with its product isn't that it isn't fast enough or cheap enough or secure enough. The problem is that it is too centralized and it's under very limited control by a limited number of people, which introduces corruption. And corruption is not something that you just fix in the next product release.
It's an innate human trait that will always exist.
It's a trait that always emerges, especially when power is concentrated in hierarchical organizations. And so the interesting thing about cryptocurrencies is that it's not about changing human behavior, it's about changing the architecture of the system to make it flat, so that there is no hierarchy or concentration of power to generate this corruption. That's the product. The product is trust based on an open network that spreads the power so thin that no one can take control over it. That's the product. And to that product, the banks have no competition and government has nothing to offer. So all of the traditional hierarchical systems are not really competing against that.
So it sounds like when you talk like that, like the genie is out of the bottle.
Well, I mean, think about it this way. This is the internet of money, right? So let's look at what happens with the internet. If you have a traditional top-down centralized newspaper and the internet comes and starts competing with you, they're not competing because they've reduced the cost of ink. They're not competing because they reduce the cost of paper. They're not competing even because they reduce the cost of distribution. The reason the internet is competing is because it opened the gates to access to information, not just as a reader, but as a publisher, gave everyone the ability to participate in the newsmaking process and become a publisher. What can a newspaper do to compete with that? The answer we've seen is nothing. They can't compete with that. It's a fundamentally different model where you have citizen participation, if you like, in the creation and consumption of information.
And within that new architecture that you spoke of, I think there's an onus on every single citizen to become a journalist in how they receive information, and
right.
that they become
Absolutely.
the custodians, or the responsibility lies with them to.
And not everybody wants that responsibility.
And that's it, exactly.
Right. Some people just want to get a drip feed from Facebook. But that's okay, because that doesn't exclude the fact that there are citizen journalists doing incredible journalism and forcing even traditional media to improve how they do their job and holding them to account. The thing is, right now, if your local newspaper doesn't hold your government to account, a 14-year-old kid can do it as a school project and embarrass an entire government by leaking, a scandal or something like that, or shining a light on corruption or whatever. And this is happening worldwide. Well, now imagine if your local bank isn't doing its job, isn't giving economic inclusion. What happens when people have access to these financial instruments across the internet for free and can take responsibility over their own finances and transactions? Yes, some people don't want that. Some people will want the convenience of a centralized institution. But as long as some people can get that choice changes the way society works.
Yeah, I mean, it's mind-boggling to think about what this technology how it can shape society.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about disrupting institutions that have not just been around for decades. We're talking about the banking system really emerged in the 15th century. So we're talking about institutions that are 500 plus years old, and that came straight out of feudalism. And they're about to get hit by this sledgehammer of internet technology, and they are sorely unprepared for what's coming.
It's like I often think of how it must have been to see money or to see currency for the first time. If you come out of a barter system or a feudal system, and somebody says this is money, you use this to trade, it's incomprehensible.
Yeah, the idea that barter systems really existed as functional systems, I think, is more myth than reality. People invented forms of money very early on, whether it was beads or shells or feathers. Money is an emergent phenomenon. I think it's more useful to think of money as a form of symbolic communication, where you use symbols to communicate value between individuals. And once you think of it as a language, as a form of communication, that makes you understand that there's no value in the symbols themselves. The value comes from how useful those symbols are as a means of communication, how far they can reach, how quickly they can be transported, how easy they are to use. That's what money is. The value is in the human interaction. The value is in the commerce we do, the services, the products that we each produce and use. And I think people still have a very difficult time understanding the abstract nature of money, why money as a symbol hasn't got any value in itself. There's no value in a euro. It's just a means to communicate the burger or the Guinness that you just got.
It's a symbol of trust, isn't it?
It's a mechanism of trust. Trust is one of the components of this symbolic language, and it's interesting what happens when you remove the intermediaries and you simply implement that language of value, which is money, on the internet technology and on network communication. And so using the internet to produce the internet of money.
Well, we look forward to it. It's a revolution.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I hope more people get to understand and experience this technology. It's going to take a while, and it can be, honestly, it can be full of opportunists. So you have to be careful when you engage in this. But if you come looking at it as a technology and developing skills in that technology, that's something that can be useful for a lot of people, especially young people who are looking for jobs now.
Andreas, thank you very much.
Thank you.